Hello, my dear friends. Hello, my dear listeners. How are you all? I hope you are doing your best to serve your duties with utmost honesty and love. So, let's start the next part of the story which we have started in the last week. And that story was Madhumala, the Wreath of Sweetness. We are reading this story from Bengal Fairy Tales, written by Francis Bradley Bird, and this book was first published in the year 1920 and it was illustrated by Abanindranath Thakur. So, till now, what we came to know? We came to know that Madan Kumar, the very beautiful son of a king, very pious and very dutiful king, he somehow he came to a jungle or a forest for hunting, and there Nidrapari and Kalapari they were amazed by his beauty, his handsomeness, and then what happened? Although I must make you and also me remember that the story behind the birth of Madan Kumar, his birth was not a normal one. He was here because of the Bidhata Purusha's wish, but as per his wish, he must be kept in a secluded place with his mother and his caretaker or nurse for long 12 years after his birth. But somehow this wish was violated by 3 days only, right? So what happened next? Let's proceed. Sister, said Kalapari, look downwards. There is one tent there full of lustre. I see 1,000 moons together, the brightest gems in the world gathered and heaped up there. Or it may be that one of the gods is reposing in the company of men. It is none of this, replied her sister. It is Madan, the son of famous king Dandodhar or Dandadhar. We must find a wife worthy of him, said Kalapari. Can you think of one? Surely, Madhumala alone is a fit bride for such a man, Nidrapari declared. Then, sister, said Kalapari, let us take up the bed on which the prince lies and carry him to his bride. Nidrapari did as her sister wished, and Madan's bed was in the twinkling of an eye carried to the regions beneath the sea and placed in Madhumala's room beside her couch. The Paris then roused them from sleep and, standing aside in the shadow, watched to see what would happen. Great was the amazement of the prince and the princess to be thus miraculously brought together, and shyly at first they began to converse. Madan gave an account of himself and Madhumala informing him who she was. The conversation soon became of an intimate nature, and with both it was a case of love at first sight. Both made promises of everlasting fidelity and exchanged rings as tokens of their plighted troth. But their enjoyment was of short duration. The Paris cast an irresistible spell on them, and they fell fast asleep, leaving the matchmakers free to dispose of them as they willed. During the small hours of the morning, they removed the prince to his camp, not on his own couch, but on that of the princess. This expedient was resorted to in order to leave a tangible token of the happy meeting. When the prince awoke in the morning, the first words he uttered were, "O Madhumala, where art thou?" His companions were naturally astounded, and the Prime Minister's son, hearing from the prince of his adventures during the night, at once declared that it must have been nothing but a dream. The prince, however, replied, "Friend, you call my experience of the past night a dream, but could a man exchange his ring with another's in a dream? See, also this couch. Is it the one on which I fell asleep last evening? The argument, though convincing enough, had no force with the minister's son, who at once made arrangements for the breaking up of the encampment and the instant return of the party to the palace. The prince reluctantly consented, but the state of his mind was unchanged. After his return home, he could speak of nothing but this adventure until at last his distracted parents feared that his mind was affected and that he was under a spell. In vain, they tried to divert his mind from the subject. The young man persisted in his assertions and ultimately implored them to allow him to set out in search of Madhumala, to whom he had plighted his troth in the dream. So these are the two paris. Paris, that means fairies, Kalapari and Nidrapari. So kala means time. Kala means even the same word, the same sounding word. It holds the meaning of black. And nidra means sleep. So what happened next? Let's proceed. It came as a terrible blow to them to realize that their darling, who had never left their side save for that one day's hunting, was about to leave them. It might be forever. They attributed all this to the anger of the gods which they had brought upon themselves by letting him leave the subterranean house 3 days earlier than they had been commanded, and falling on his neck they implored him with torrents of tears to give up the enterprise, which in their opinion was no better than a wild goose chase. But nothing could divert him from his purpose, and the king, to make the best of a bad case, prepared for him a ship with a great company of followers. On an auspicious day, he put the dust of his parents' feet upon his head and started on the voyage to the seas under which he believed his sweetheart dwelt. Many days and nights, many months even, passed by without success, attending the prince's quest till at length, overtaken by a violent storm, they were all drowned save the prince, who after 3 days was washed by the waves on the beach, quite insensible. Some goatherds found him and resuscitated him. Upon being asked who he was and with what object he had set out upon the seas, the prince told them everything, not omitting to mention with particular emphasis the name Madhumala. The mention of this name acted like a charm upon them, and with joy they cried out, "Ah, this is he for whom our king's daughter Champakala or Champakola has been waiting for." From books of astrology and the god Shiva, to whom she daily prays to bring her husband to her, she has learned that one who is out seeking for Madhumala's abode shall be her lord. Saying this, they took Madan to their king, who, aware of the revelation made to his daughter, at once introduced him to her. She asked her father to marry her to the youth who was so obviously destined to be her husband, and the nuptials were celebrated that very day with great pomp. When the couple retired to the bridal chamber, Champakala told her husband that she knew of his longing for Madhumala, and that though she herself was not aware of her whereabouts, the information could be obtained from a princess named Panchakala, dwelling far off in a region where 7 rivers met. She then made the prince promise her that On his successful return, he would take her to his father's kingdom and acknowledge her as his wife. The next morning, Champakala, according to her promise, allowed her husband to depart. After a long and tedious journey of many days, he reached the outskirts of the kingdom of Panchakala's father. There being met and detained by a sepoy of the king's, he said, "Oh, brother, detain me not. I have to find out Madhumala, my beloved." The sepoy replied, "Now at last my duty is done. I have been posted here to lead to the king one who should in any way allude to Madhumala. You, sir, have uttered the name and must now follow me." Saying this, he had a chaturdola or palanquin brought and took the prince to the palace where a scene similar to that which had transpired between him and Champakala took place, after which he was directed by his new wife to seek a princess named Chandrakala, who was Madhumala's intimate friend. Setting out on the following morning, the prince again made a long journey, and after crossing rivers, seas, mountains, and forests, at length reached the kingdom of Chandrakala's father. There he met with a hearty welcome, for the king, aspired beforehand of his future son in law's arrival, had made preparations to receive him. Madan and Chandrakala were married that very day, and when the former told the latter the object he had in view, she said that Madhumala was her friend and that she would put him in the way of finding her. She also advised him not to accept any other dowry from her father save the peacock on the steeple of the garden temple in his kingdom. The boon was asked and granted, and Madan, mounted on the peacock's back, started in search of Madhumala, promising Chandrakala that when he returned he would take her to his father's kingdom with his other wives. Let us now return to Madhumala, whom we left sleeping on Madan's couch. The next morning, her maids, as usual, came into her room and finding it disordered, asked her the reason. She answered nothing in reply, merely exclaiming again and again, "Oh, Prince Madan!" At this they feared that she had lost her reason and ran to the king and queen with the report. They instantly hurried to their daughter's chamber with the best physicians available in the kingdom. They were all at a loss to conjecture what was the matter with the princess, and leaving her undisturbed, they withdrew to hold a consultation, which however ended in nothing. Day after day passed, and the king, in despair, gave orders to put his capital in mourning. His own palace of gold he had demolished, saying it was no longer of use to him until his daughter got Prince Madan back. He sent a written message throughout the habitable world to the effect that there was a bride named Madhumala with a kingdom awaiting the prince Madan Kumar. But the messengers returned without finding the prince. The king, no longer able to bear the sight of his daughter's sufferings, resolved to make away with his life. But happily, good fortune dawned upon him at last. One night, the sentinels on duty saw a brilliant light as of innumerable torches high up in the air, and as they gazed at it, a splendid looking youth astride a golden peacock alighted. It was thus that Madan Kumar came to find his beloved Madhumala. On alighting, the prince saw that the palace was in a ruined condition, and attributing it to some terrible calamity feared for the safety of his love, his anguish was intolerable, and he broke forth into bitter lamentation, saying, "Tell me, O skies and seas, what has caused these ruins, and who has robbed me of my beloved? Beautiful as the full moon, O ye gods, bring my life, my Madhumala back to me." His voice was heard by her whose ears had waited so long for it, and Madhumala, rushing forth from the chamber where she had for so many days imprisoned herself, caught her lover in her arms and taking him into the most secluded of her apartments, kept its doors shut for 7 days. In the meantime, her parents learned from the sentinels what had happened, and on the seventh day they came and knocked at the door of her room. No notice was at first taken of their summons, but on their repeatedly knocking and calling, Madhumala from within asked her father if he could bear what he might see. On his replying, the door was opened, and the king and all the people with him exclaimed, "What is it that we see? Is it not the full moon by the side of the sun that rises at dawn? Or may it not two gilded pictures placed side by side?" Next day, the king ordered the palace to be rebuilt, and it quickly attained its former splendor. An auspicious day was appointed for the marriage of Madan and Madhumala, and a letter was sent to King Dandadhar, the father of the former, inviting him to be present at the wedding. The letter was like precious balm to his and his wife's long afflicted hearts, and with great rejoicings they set out for the kingdom under the ground. Their voyage was prosperous, and they arrived in time to witness the marriage, which was celebrated with unusual splendor. For 13 days and nights, dainties were freely distributed to all the guests, whose number was unlimited, and a rich dowry consisting of a kingdom of 70 scores of parganas and of heaps of gems and gold mohurs was given to Madan Kumar. A few days after this, King Dandadhar expressed the wish that his son, daughter in law, and attendants might be permitted to leave for home, and preparations were at once made for their journey. Madan and Madhumala were to go on the peacock's back, while the others would sail in ships and astrologers as favorable. The whole party left the kingdom after the exchange of the most cordial farewells. King Dandadhar, after a safe voyage, reached his kingdom with all his attendants, but his son, though on the peacock's back, was late by a few days. He had had to delay some time on the way to visit his other wives and arranged to take them along with him. At length, he reached his father's dominions in safety and entered the palace amidst joyous acclamations, grand illuminations, and fireworks. The family guru, the priest, and all those women fortunate enough all those women fortunate enough to have their husbands living, chanting hymns of thanksgiving and praise. So, my dear friends, today here is the story. We have completed this story, and from this story, we got a glimpse of different different extents or realms of human thoughts, that even in the patal or in the seas there is there was some kind of civilization, right? So they are the beautiful thoughts, and maybe in our future we will see that we have to habituate the sea floors or sea beds also. So let's hope for a good future. With this, I am stopping here. Be happy, be jolly. Ta-da!